Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Laura and today I am resurrecting the Manga Monday video series on a Tuesday because I was late posting yesterday like I had planned, wasn't feeling well and up to filming. So today we are doing that instead. And what we're going to do is we're going to start off by talking about foodie manga. But before I get into that, if you're not aware of Manga Monday, this is a video series that I post every second and every fourth Monday of the month. I talk about a topic and recommend to you manga based on that topic. And this is a series that you're welcome to participate in as well. I do already have all of the posts that I am planning pre-planned, so they are all listed on my blog. I will link it up below if you want to make a blog post or YouTube video on the same topic at the same time. Please feel free to join in. But do know that this is going to actually end in the second week of December. So that's when the last Manga Monday video series like this is going to end. I may continue a series with the same title, or I may continue something else in the future. I do have quite a lot of plans and I haven't been able to do them because I've had this sort of ongoing, which I've really enjoyed doing, but there are lots of other things that I want to be doing as well. So I am going to drop this at the end of the year and I'm going to start something new in 2019, so you can look forward to that. But in the meantime, if you want to participate, those will all be listed on my blog and links will be below. So today we're going to talk about foodie manga, or basically any manga where food takes sort of a main place in the plot of a manga. It's, you know, either a story about chefs or it revolves around food, around eating food, food preparation in some way. So that's what I'm going to recommend to you today. There are tons and tons of manga about food and about cooking, and there are some that are in English. There's certainly a lot more out there than I have read or that I even own, so I'm not going to recommend maybe some of the titles that you already know or are aware of, and hopefully you will find some new titles to kind of discover. And certainly if after watching this video you notice that I haven't recommended your favorite, I would love to hear recommendations down below. I certainly haven't read everything in this area and I am always looking for recommendations, and certainly anyone else who is watching this video as well would love recommendations on foodie manga, so please leave them down below. So let's start. So the first title that I wanted to recommend to you is recently out of print. Hopefully you can find yourself a copy, but it is really worth trying to locate, and that would be The Drops of God by Tadashi and Shu Okimoto. This is a 4-volume series in English. You can see the size of it here. I am under the impression that it was actually stopped short, but has a conclusive ending. This is a series that I'm still currently reading, so I can't tell you what the ending is like at the moment. So this is basically the story about a very famous wine critic. He recently passes away and he ends up leaving his son an inheritance of his wine collection. He has amassed this amazing and giant collection of rare and expensive and valuable wines that everybody, anyone who knows anything about wines would want to get their hands on. Unfortunately, this son is not interested in wine, and because of the way that his father had raised him, he wants nothing to do with wine. He's never tasted wine. He actually works as a beer seller, and so he knows a lot about beers, but he does not want anything to do with wine at all. And the catch on top of this is that in order to inherit all of this fortune, he needs to identify this these 12 great wines. And basically, I think he has a year to come up with what these 12 kind of the greatest wines are, and identify them in order to gain his inheritance. This wouldn't normally be an issue for him. He probably would have just said, no, I don't really need these wines. I don't really care. I don't understand my father. But a little extra sting in this situation is that his father has recently adopted another wine critic, someone who's about the same age as his son, who is also competing to win this inheritance. So now he has a rival, and needs to learn about wine in order to find out what these 12 wines are, to kind of make that decision. And so this is basically a story of him kind of learning about wine, learning how to understand wine, how to pinpoint all of the different nuances of wines, and kind of find the value in what his father was doing, and kind of realize what his father kind of how his father raised him, and what wines actually meant to him. So it's a really interesting story because it kind of is a story about a son kind of learning about his father through his father's passion after his father has passed away. But at the same time, because of this rivalry, because of this competition, it actually feels a lot like a sports manga. There's a lot of you know, he has to learn about something, and he has to kind of level up his experience, and then, you know, has some sort of a test or a challenge in order to kind of show off his skills. It has a lot of that feel. It's definitely not as action-packed as a sports manga, but it definitely has a lot of the rotation in the storyline. The storyline kind of has the same flow that you would expect in a sports manga. So I was really enjoying this when I was reading it. I definitely want to pick it up again and keep going. Like I said, it doesn't complete, but I'm under the impression that the 4th volume was actually kind of curated. It doesn't just end abruptly. I think it was curated by the author when he discovered that it wasn't going to continue. This is my impression. Please don't quote me on this, but I believe he curated that last story so that people got some sort of a conclusion when they actually read the story. So I am very hopeful that the end is going to be really interesting, and it is a really good title, and certainly the art in it is the art in it is really very good. There's quite a lot of text in it, as you would kind of expect, and certainly a lot of drawings of wine. And all of the characters are really attractive. All of the characters are quite likable, except the rival, but you know, that person's always going to be annoying. I'm really enjoying this, and I certainly think that if this sounds like something that you would be into, I would definitely recommend it. The next title that I recommend to you is What Did You Eat Yesterday by Fumi Yoshinaga. Now, Fumi Yoshinaga has at least 3 food-based manga in my collection. There's also What Did You Eat Yesterday, which is a story about a Fumi Yoshinaga-like character going out to restaurants and eating food there, including addresses of the restaurants that she eats at. Very interesting. I personally don't find it very entertaining, but it's very interesting to read, and it's just 1 volume, so certainly would recommend checking it out, especially if you're a Fumi Yoshinaga fan. There's another title, I think it's Cafe Kichijoji. I think that's the title, but I can't remember anymore. I think that's about a 4-volume series about some young men who have a patissier, or a kind of a bakery. And then there's this title, which is What Did You Eat Yesterday? And basically this is a story about 2 gay men who live together. I don't believe they're married, because you can't get married in Japan. And basically it's a story of after work and eating together. It really is, you know, they both have very distinct and separate lives, and it's just them enjoying each other's company, enjoying good food, discussing what their life is like, discussing the problems that they have as a gay couple even in Japan. It's very interesting. It's definitely more thought-provoking, I think, than you would expect from a foodie manga, because it's the experience of sitting around a table and eating with someone, and having a, you know, communication with them, and really talking about what your day is like, and getting to know someone. So this is a really interesting story, because it really is, I think, more what the experience of, you know, sitting down and having dinner with the person that you live with is like. What also is really great about this series is at the end of every volume you also have recipes, and so you could potentially make the thing that is being eaten in this particular volume of manga. So there's, you know, there's good conversation, there's interesting stories about, you know, food preparation, the care about food preparation, and then recipes at the end. It's A really good manga. Fumi Yoshinaga, I think, really just sort of understands human nature in just like kind of its most realistic aspects. It just always, her characters and their relationships and the way that they talk to each other always feels incredibly natural to me. I really am enjoying the series. Again, another one I haven't finished, but I don't believe it is finished publication yet. It is getting a little bit longer. I think it's into the teens at the moment, but certainly definitely worth checking out if you would be interested. Switching gears, we've got Yakitate Japan, and this is a comedy shonen manga. It's by Takashi Hashiguchi, and it is, I think, also possibly into the 20s of volumes, and it is a little bit older, so it might be harder to get. I don't know if Viz is offering it digitally, but basically this is the story about a young man who is his kind of goal in life is to create the Japan. And pan, if you don't know in Japanese, is the word for bread. So he wants to create the national bread of Japan. In the first volume, it basically starts off with him applying to become, to work at this bakery, basically to be trained at this bakery. And he has a lot of inventions and a lot of ideas about how to create the Japan. In addition to that, of course, not only does he have a passion for bread, but he has a hidden skill. He has these hands of the gods, which they kind of discover, which makes him kind of one of the best people to make bread. He has this natural gift of bread making ability. And it is just a lot of fun. There's a lot of really crazy characters in it. There's a lot of competitions like you would expect in this style of manga. Like I said a little bit with the Drops of the God, this one is definitely more of a sports type manga because there is quite a lot more competition. Also, the characters are really very random and comedic and silly. Certainly if you're more kind of familiar or more practiced in reading shonen comedy, I would say that this would probably be a good fit. It is definitely a lot of fun. Now this is an unusual manga because it's not something that you would typically think about eating and certainly typically think about food, and that would happen to be Delicious in Dungeon by Ryoko Kui. This is a story about a group of adventurers who are down in the dungeons. They have lost all of their food and all of their money, and so they aren't able to stay down in these dungeons very long before they have to resurface and, you know, collect food and eat and, you know, get provisions. So they aren't able to do the exploring and adventuring that like they would like. Something ends up happening. The main character's, I believe, sister gets kidnapped by a monster and taken down into these dungeons, and they need to, as a group, go after her. But because they can't stay down in the dungeons, they wouldn't make it, basically, until one of them has a brilliant idea. Let's eat the monsters. And so this is basically a story of them exploring down in the dungeons, but also learning techniques and cooking monsters and catching monsters and preparing foods based on what they discover down in the dungeons. So it's very unique, very strange type story. It certainly is very much a fantasy story. It reminds me a lot of, at least my impression of what you know, playing Dungeons and Dragons might be like. So if that's sort of your area of fandom, that might be more appealing to you. It is a very unique take on a foodie manga, and it's currently serializing, so easier to get your hands on than some of these others, but it is a fun title and I definitely would recommend checking it out. So of course I need to include a shoujo manga. The one I've picked is Komomo Confisserie. This is by Maki Minami. It's a fairly short series. It's only 5 volumes. It was recently in print. Should still be in print. Should still be able to get your hands on it. This is a very fun romance based on a very common or typical trope. This is basically the story of a rich young lady who, you know, lives with her parents in, you know, a mansion, and they have a private chef, and the chef has a young son. I think actually he's a baker, or, you know, patissier who makes fancy desserts. So anyway, he has a young son, and the boy and the girl, they always play together, although because she's a rich young lady and she's quite spoiled, she treats him very poorly. And she has this At least the one thing that she really loves about this boy is that he always brings her sweets, and so when she's feeling really down, he'll bring her sweets, she'll feel a lot better. Of course something happens. The boy and the father end up moving away, and she and her family end up falling into poverty, and so basically the story begins at the point where she has been abandoned by her parents and needs to kind of make her way in the world. Of course, she's going to meet this young boy who is now a teenager, and she is going to kind of come under his care. He is now a patissier himself, or he, you know, also makes desserts, has a shop, and she ends up taking a job at his shop. So that's basically a very common scenario where, you know, the one character goes away, they promise to meet again in the future. I don't think there's a promise in this one, can't quite remember, but they end up coming back together again, and the relationship has changed. So this one's quite fun just because the characters don't react quite like you would expect in most other shoujo manga. It's still a romance, but the way that they react is quite different and fun, and I really, really liked it. But the fact that their connection is really through these sweets, it's through making of desserts, it's through these like beautiful presentations, and it's through how the food makes them feel, is really what this story has at its core, and it is a lot of fun to read. If you're into shoujo romance manga, I think this is a lot of fun, and I definitely would recommend checking it out. And the last title I recommend is one of the longest running manga in Japan. Has over 111 tankobon volumes in publication and is one of the best-selling manga of all time, and that would be Oishinbo by Tetsu, Kariya, and Akira Hanasaki. Oishinbo is basically a play on words. Oishi means delicious, and kuishinbo, I believe, means someone who likes to eat food. So it's a combination of those two words. This is basically a curated collection of those 111 volumes, so if you're worried about having to go and buy so much, you really don't have to. There's only a handful of titles actually available, and they've been curated based on the type of food or food preparation that is within those stories. So you've got Japanese cuisine, vegetables, ramen and gyoza, fish, sushi and sashimi, the joy of rice, izakaya pub food, and sake. And this is basically a story, obviously a bunch of short stories because you couldn't curate if the story was kind of really very continuous. So it's basically a selection of short stories. It is about two rival newspapers and about the two foodies who are heading up basically a project to create the greatest menu ever. Now the two foodies happen to be father and son, so the one on one newspaper is the owner of a world-famous restaurant, and the other is a newspaper reporter who happens to be a son and obviously has is very well versed in food and food culture. So it's basically a comparison between very fashionable, very meticulous, very detailed, and proper food preparation versus the son, who has a very casual way about food, about creating the simplest flavors, about using simple tools, and just making very clean, good food. So it is a comparison between those two, and certainly there's a lot of rivalry between the two characters. It is a good story, but it also is just one that really teaches you about food culture in Japan. It teaches you about important ingredients, and it just opens your eyes to the world of food. It's very educational, but also very entertaining, and it's just a lot of fun to read, and I've really been enjoying reading this particular series. Not a lot of volumes to pick up. I do believe it is currently out of print, or very soon will be out of print, so I would recommend picking any up, but you don't need to read these in any particular order, so don't feel bad if you don't find them all. I don't think there's a volume 1. You can read them in any particular order you want. So I definitely would recommend checking this one out. It is one of the longest running series in Japan. This is what the art looks like, and definitely you can see as you're reading it why people would be drawn to it. It's just highly engaging, highly enlightening when you read it. And like a lot of these series, you just learn so much about food while also enjoying a really good, fun story. So I would definitely recommend this title, and I particularly like it. So these are the titles that I recommend you definitely want to check out if you're interested in reading about food, or you like food, or you're a foodie yourself. And they're all really fun, really entertaining, really educational, and I really recommend all of them. So I think you go and check them out if you are able to pick up copies for yourself. If you like foodie manga, or if you've read a foodie manga that you really like and would like to recommend, I'd love to hear it down below. I love recommendations. I love reading manga, so any other recommendations for titles I should be checking out, would love to hear it. And so would probably anyone else who's interested. And I think that's all. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.